What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the video. And today we'll be talking about AWS load balancers. Specifically, we'll be talking about application load balancers. We'll first look at some concepts related to load balancers, and then we'll jump into a console demo. So what is elastic load balancing? Well, as the name says, it is a way of elastically load balancing your traffic to multiple EC2 instances. Elastic load balancing automatically distributes incoming application traffic across multiple targets, such as EC2 instances. This can be done across multiple availability zones. Next up, let's look at the 4 different types of load balancers. So first of all, we have the application load balancer. That's the one we'll be focusing on today. They are more seen as intelligent load balancers, and they can intelligently load balance. They are best suited for HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Next up, we have network load balancers, which are more performance based. So they are really useful where a lot of performance is required. And they are capable of handling millions of requests per second while maintaining ultra low latencies. Next up, we have gateway load balancers. This is a really niche type of load balancer. You won't really see it often. And it is best suited for inline virtual appliance load balancing. And then lastly, we have classic load balancers, which is more of your dev and test load balancers. They can also balance HTTP and HTTPS applications. Let's move on to health checks. All AWS load balancers can be configured with health checks. Health checks periodically send requests to load balancers' registered instances to test their status. The status of the instances that are healthy at the time of the check is in service, and the statuses of the instances that are unhealthy at the time of the health check is out of service. The load balancer performs health checks on all registered instances, whether the instance is in a healthy state or in an unhealthy state. The load balancer routes requests only to healthy instances. When the load balancer determines an instance is unhealthy, it stops routing requests to that instance. And then the load balancer resumes routing requests to that instance once the instance has been restored to a healthy state again. Next up, we'll take a closer look at load balancing at layer 7. An application load balancer functions at layer 7 of the OSI model. After the load balancer receives a request, it evaluates the listener rules in priority order to determine which rules need to be applied, and then selects a target from the target group for the rule action. Let's take a look at listeners. A listener checks for a connection request from a client using the protocol and port that you configure. You define rules that determine how the load balancer routes requests to its registered target. And each rule consists of a priority, one or more actions, and also one or more conditions. Next up are rules. When the conditions for a rule are met, then its actions are performed. You must define a default rule for each listener, and you can optionally define an additional rule. Heading over to target groups. Each target group routes requests to one or more registered targets, such as an EC2 instance, using the protocol and port number that you specify. All right, and here's a diagram of what the process looks like. You have your application load balancer here at the top, and then we have 2 listeners. This listener could be for port 80, and this listener could be for port 443 HTTPS, and this one HTTP. You can see it only has one rule, which routes the incoming HTTP traffic to your targets in your specified web server target group, and then it has a health check attached. And then for this listener, which is on port 443, it could be that one of your clients has a static IP address, which means that you would need to route them to the internet, which means you would need to route them to a different target group. So by attaching multiple rules to your listeners, you can intelligently load balance your traffic to various targets in various target groups, with all of them having health checks attached to them. And then one last thing before we get into the demo. Application load balancers are more URL or path based, while network load balancers are more IP address based. And application load balancers only support HTTP and HTTPS traffic. They don't support any other listeners. Okay, so here we are in the AWS Management Console. So what we are going to do is we're going to launch 3 EC2 instances. We're going to spin up 3 web servers. So let's click on the EC2 instance dashboard. Let's just click 3 times, control click 3 times on the launch instance to make it easier for ourselves. So we're going to call this one web server 1. We're going to call this one web server 2. And then this one web server 3. So just scroll down. We're going to do the Amazon Linux AMI t2.micro here. Let me just use a scroll bar. We're going to select a key pair that I created, the Yanru Ireland key pair. Then here on network settings, we're going to click edit. Then gonna go down and just create a security group. So you can do Yanru SG. And then here in subnet, we want to make sure that all 3 of these instances are in a different availability zone. So for the first instance, so web server 1, I'm going to choose EU West 1A. Let's just go over to web server 2 so long, and then do the same. So here, just create a Yanru and then SG. And then the subnet, we're going to choose EU West 1B. Just copy this security group name. I just want to make sure it's the same name. And then select the key pair again. Did I select the key pair here? No, I didn't. Key pair here. And then here on web server 3, just create the security group again and then select EU West 1C as the availability zone. Then going back to the first subnet, we want to choose HTTP here. We're just going to choose normal HTTP. So where is that? Here, and then we're just going to allow that from anywhere. Let's just do that for the other 2 instances. And then, yeah, this one. Oh, HTTPS. Just do HTTP for now. And then lastly, we're going to go to advanced details over here and then scroll all the way down. And then we are going to paste in the script. The script will be available in the description. So this is just a simple script. Basically, it just does a yum update and then it installs Apache, and then it just cds into this www /html directory, and then it just creates a simple web page. And then we can enter here. You are looking at web server 1, and then let's copy that. And then on web server 2, we can paste in and then just replace it with web server 2. And then on web server 3, just paste it again and then replace it with web server 3. All right, and that's everything. We are going to launch these instances, and I'll be back when everything is up and running. Okay, all 3 of the instances are up and running. When you create the first instance, just make sure that your security group is created. And then when you create the other 2 instances, just select existing security group because all 3 of them need to be in the same security group. So yeah, I got an error when I just wanted to create all of them with the same name, because obviously it says that there is already a security group with that name that already exists. All right, now moving on, when you click on web server and then just click on the copy URL or copy the IPv4 address and then paste them into your URL in a new tab. So you can do that with all three of them, and I've opened them up here. So you're looking at web server 1 and you're looking at web server 2 and web server 3. Just manually type in HTTP and the IP addresses. And then we can go back here, and then we can also see that they are all three of them in different availability zones: EU West 1A, EU West 1B, and EU West 1C. So now that that's done, let's scroll down here and click on load balancers, because we are going to create a load balancer. Click on create load balancer and choose application load balancer. Okay, so here on the application load balancer creation screen, we can just do some basic configurations. So giving the application load balancer a name, we can give it a name. I'm just going to give it Yandru ALB application load balancer. Then you can choose a scheme, whether it's internet facing or internal. I'm just going to leave it as internet facing. And then load balancer IP address type. So do we want it IPv4 or do we want to include IPv6? We're just going to leave it as IPv4. And then here on network mapping, you can include mappings for all three of our availability zones just by clicking on the checkboxes. Then going down here to security groups, you can have up to 5 security groups, so I can select the security group that we created, just Yandere SG. And then here you can add a listener for port 443 HTTPS, but yeah, I don't want to manage SSL certificates. So if you can or are able to manage your SSL certificates, you can add listeners for HTTPS. And then here is where we need to select our target group. So when I click on the drop down, you can see that we don't have any target group. So I'm just going to control click on this button right here, where we need to create our target group. Then yeah, for instances, I'm just going to scroll down and just call it Yanru TG target group, and then just leave it as HTTP and IPv4. I'm just going to select the default VPC over here, and then just scroll down, and then advanced health checks. Here we can just make this the minimum of 2, make this the minimum of 2, and then we can leave this as 6. Because it needs to be anything higher than 5 seconds. And then we can just click on next. Then we can just click on all of the instances over here, and then we can say create target group. Right, so there our target group has been created. Then we can go back to our original screen and then refresh over here, and then we can select our Yandere TG target group. Then you can scroll down to a bit more over here. Then it has optional stuff for integration with other AWS services like Web Application Firewall and AWS Global Accelerator, but we don't really care about that right now. So here's just a summary, and then we can just go ahead and say create load balancer. Okay, so we can see that the status of the Elastic Load Balancer is now in active state. Let's just scroll down, let's just copy the DNS name to our clipboard. Let's just scroll down and then just go to our target group to make sure everything is set up correctly. So you can see we have 3 targets, they're all in the healthy state, they are passing the health checks. If for some reason you don't have your targets here, just click on register targets to register them. So when I open up the DNS name in a new tab, you can see it's here web server 3, and then when I refresh, it's web server 1, web server 2, web server 3, web server 1, with server 2. So you can see that it is correctly load balancing the traffic between our 3 availability zones. That is all for this video on Elastic Load Balancers. We covered application load balancers. Thank you all for the support, and please like and subscribe.